All right, hello, and thank you all once again for another episode of the Professional Pricing Society podcast. My name is Terrence, and in today's discussion, we have a very special guest with us, and her name is Angie Jackson. She is the Director of Key Accounts and Marketing here at PPS, and she is here with us today to discuss how you all, as pricers, can deliver informed marketing feedback or suggestions for forward momentum to support your pricing initiatives. Angie joined PPS back in 2021, and she has nearly 20 years of experience in sales, marketing, education, and project management, both locally and internationally. And prior to joining PPS, she served as a positioning strategist with Crane Atlanta, specializing in analyzing audience trends, managing creative teams, collaborating with clients, and developing innovative and integrative marketing strategies to distill clients' unique value propositions. Angie, how are we doing today?
Excellent. Hi, Terrence. I'm excited to
Uh,
be on our podcast.
yes, it's a pleasure to have you. It's very nice to hear a very friendly face on this podcast. So I'm glad to have you as well. And what we're talking about today is essentially the bridge between pricing and marketing. And what better person to spearhead this conversation than someone who has been leading a career the past 20 years in something as creative as marketing and as sales and all these different things that you have under your belt. And so bringing it into the pricing world is super necessary. And we're glad to have you.
Thanks, Terrence. So yes, pricing is a P of marketing, one of the P's, and that's really as much as I knew about pricing coming
Mhm.
in. In my time at PPS, I've thought about where are the intersections between pricing and marketing, and how do we sort of systematize some of that thinking so that we can be
Mhm.
more collaborative. Maybe as a pricer, you report to marketing. How do you ensure that your marketing from a company-wide level supports what you're doing in pricing, or
Mhm.
really anything that you're doing business-wise? So I'm going to look at this through a pricing lens, but this is applicable to other aspects of businesses, sales, any sort of management. How do you
Mhm.
provide informed feedback towards the end of collaboration so that the marketing supports the decisions and the choices that you need to make for your business? What's unique about being a marketer, and Terrence, I think you'll understand this. We've had conversations about this before. It's different from a lot of other jobs because everyone encounters marketing, right? Everybody sees
Sure.
TV ads, those shoes that you searched for on Zappos, those start
Mhm.
following you around when you're
Mhm.
reading New York Times articles. So we're very used to advertising as a form of marketing. So, what that sometimes empowers people to do is to give feedback on marketing because they've encountered ads.
Mhm. Sure, sure.
And sometimes that marketing isn't as informed, or their feedback isn't as informed as it could be.
Mm.
I have a lot of people who tell me how to do my job because they've seen Super Bowl ads.
Mm. Mhm.
So that's to say a lot of marketing is subjective.
Sure.
Um, I don't care for the color purple personally.
Mhm.
That is my taste.
Mm.
And that is not informed by any best practice or marketing strategy. That is just my taste.
Mhm. Yep, yep.
So I want to encourage people to leave matters of taste aside
Mhm.
as we think about today a rubric where we can deliver informed feedback. So, what are some tried and true benchmarks? And I've created a little acronym based upon best practices and also my experience. In a previous life as an account executive, I received a lot of feedback, and a lot of it was unhelpful because it landed
Mhm.
in that matter of taste.
Mhm.
But when we can deliver feedback based upon a shared rubric that's
Mhm.
evidence based, we're more likely to get traction and collaboration
Mhm.
amongst teams that can historically be relatively siloed, and get support for any change that we want to make in price.
I'm glad also, Angie, that you clarified what this conversation is all about because, a lot of people they do have their opinions and they do have their preferences, but like you said, there's a tried and true practice, a template and a structure of sorts, if you will, that can lead to successful marketing, not just marketing, but successful marketing that leads to change and transformation within the business and revenue growth and just a number of different aspects of the company that can just continue to grow and increase. This acronym that stands as a tried and true practice, especially based off of your past 20 years of experience, is super helpful. And it's the word evaluate. And I want to kind of deep dive into each letter and why each point of this acronym, is super important as it pertains to marketing. If it's okay, let's go ahead and dive into what E stands for. End to end, which essentially is thinking with the end in mind before the process even begins. So let's kind of deep dive into this. Where does the end to end, what are your thoughts about this first letter?
You've got it. And I'm going to model actually thinking about the end to end right now.
Hmm.
So let me unpack the entire acronym before I dive in.
Yes.
So again, begin with the end in mind.
Yes.
So evaluate, the acronym stands for E, end to end, V, value proposition, A, audience, L, lean, U, unexpected,
Mhm.
A, authentic, T, transform, and E, experience. So
Mhm.
there are 9 points. I talk fast and talk a lot. So in order to not make this a full day workshop, I'm gonna roll pretty quick. Okay. So let's
Okay,
jump
let's do
into
it.
end to end. As you said, we'll start with E, end to end, that you begin with the end in mind. So you think through the entire transformation that you're trying to have occur in an audience member or the audience at large
Mhm.
before you start with small things. So let's say we are providing feedback on a item, a piece
Mhm.
of marketing, right? So whether that be a piece or an ad, is whatever you're evaluating strategic or merely tactical? Are we able to take whatever this piece is and move them from a cold audience, right? The sales term, a cold
Mhm.
audience member, who is unknown or unfamiliar with your product or service, and move them to a raving fan? That's typically difficult to do in one transaction, but how
Mhm.
are we sort of setting the table and meeting the audience where they are along their decision journey so that this marketing or communications interaction will shepherd them to the next step with us?
Mhm.
So, for example, when Kevin would ask me to write a LinkedIn ad for something, I
Mhm.
would personally write, which is a small, you have like a teeny tiny copy count and you're doing one little
Yes.
teeny tiny image. I would never do that first for any item I was producing for PPS,
Mhm.
because what I want to do is think through the entire strategic arc of the communications and solve the problem, the marketing problem, in its largest form first before I start going into any little pieces. So, what's the
Mhm.
highest context that we're going to be making the argument for whatever thing it is, right? Let's say it's the Las Vegas event that's coming up.
Yes.
I write the entire narrative arc for that decision journey from a marketing perspective before I write a teeny tiny ad.
Mhm.
So something a predecessor, a marketing mentor of mine would always say is get all of your ingredients, your marketing ingredients out on the table
Mhm.
before you ever start cooking anything. And she's right. So that includes visual ingredients, strategic ingredients, tactical ingredients, design ingredients, and many more. I'm suggesting don't solve a marketing problem in its smallest context. Solve it in the largest before you begin,
Mhm.
because all of the ingredients may teach you something
Yes.
that you need to learn before you
Yes.
move on.
That's good. And it's kind of like building a house.
Yeah.
You wouldn't just start building a house without having all of the necessary equipment or pieces. And so I like what you said. I think a lot of companies, maybe not companies, but a lot of people in marketing may fall, I guess, victim to this
Mhm.
as far as not thinking with the end in mind first and not seeing where this whole picture, how this whole picture looks before just, putting together the pieces. And so, yeah, this is a great point, starting with the end in mind so that you can actually piece together everything in a more of a smoother way, be able to move on to your next point, which is value proposition, a little bit easier.
Yes, agree. So with V standing for value proposition, I hope all the pricers' ears perk up here, because that's
Hmm.
essentially what PPS is seeking to do, right?
Hmm.
To not only set prices that are scientifically and creatively backed, but also making sure they are tied to the value that we
Hmm.
bring, right? Pricing is an exchange for value. So before you share, my Angie Jackson's recommendation is before you
Hmm.
share a price for anything, how is it tied to your value proposition? So value proposition from a marketing lens, or what service or product do you and only you provide? So this is
Hmm.
backed by a branding term called the category of one,
Hmm.
um, which says, if your space, your market is too crowded, then create a category that you can be first in. Cirque du Soleil is an excellent example of that, right? It's neither circus nor theater. It's somewhere between both. As I was searching for who first used the category of one term, I didn't find it, and I was highly distracted by the example of become the Beyonce of your space when I was Googling it, right? Talk about
Uh-huh.
pricing power. Beyonce can charge whatever she
Right.
wants,
Yep. Yep.
right? For
Hmm.
her concerts, because she didn't follow the mold, and
Hmm.
she created a category in which she can be first in. It's only when you understand your value can you communicate price.
Yeah, that's good. You want to know what you're going to get for your buck,
Hmm.
and you want to know how it's going to benefit your life first. At least you should know that, and that's fair. So attaching a value proposition before any type of numbers are associated with anything is a very strategic way of moving in a marketing world. And it's been proven, tried and true, to be successful and have higher success rates. And so yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, also in this acronym, you have the letter A, which stands for audience. Please
Hmm.
shed some light on why it's super important for everybody to kind of consider their audience first when it comes to this bridge between marketing and pricing.
Sure thing. So now that we've talked at the beginning of the end of the entire journey, and we've talked about the value proposition, it is mission critical to talk about audience.
Hmm.
um, Something that pricing and marketing both have in common is that neither should start with those things. It should
Hmm.
start with the audience.
Hmm.
We don't get to price nor market in a vacuum. Instead, we are marketing to and pricing for humans, either collectively or individually. So, how do we think about those humans in a at least two-pronged approach? I could talk about audience all day. When it comes to two-pronged approach, demographics have to be involved, right? So demographics are things like where do they live? How old are they?
Hmm.
Just, the quantitative items that we can know about our audience members. Then we move into the more qualitative items, or I would call psychographics.
Hmm.
What are their beliefs? What are their pain points? What are their opinions, right? Not based on facts. What are their personalities like, habits, lifestyle? And probably most importantly, what's their value system?
Hmm.
Both those or all of those items need to be taken into consideration when pricing to them and to marketing to them. So anytime we're evaluating a marketing piece, whether we're pricers or someone in a marketing adjacent role, or even just in a business role, we think about who's the audience for this item and what do they value? What do they care about? What systems, thinking systems, feeling systems are they bringing to the table when they engage with whatever this piece is, digital, print, whatever?
Hmm.
And how is this marketing responding appropriately to them? If I were writing something or designing something for a Boston cop, let's say, who was nearing retirement,
Hmm.
that would look and sound wildly different than some Atlanta millennial, Southern suburban baseball mom, right?
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think about the archetype of the human I'm trying to talk to when I write something or design something.
Hmm.
The strategy should be different for those two people. And I know that's super stereotypical, and please, I apologize for how stereotypical that sounds. But we would
Hmm.
give a very different strategy or a very different message and probably meet them at a very different medium than we
Yes.
would, you know,
Yeah.
if we were trying to talk to them both. From an audience perspective, something I've learned in my career is that if you're trying to talk to two very different audiences at once, you
Hmm.
can't talk to them both well. So
Hmm.
you need to pick an audience hierarchy. If I'm trying to speak to both those people, I need to begin with a message that would appeal to them both and then pretty quickly bifurcate,
Mm,
which is what's amazing about AI technology and the technologies that we have to be able to segment audiences, which is a lever that we pull in pricing as well.
mhm,
So how are we meeting our people clearly defined where they are, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, needs to be
mhm.
taken into consideration.
Yeah, that's super important. Essentially, the audience is the target, and you need to know where the target is before you shoot the arrow. And
Yes.
obviously, you and I both know that if we are marketing a service or a product to an audience that is in need of it or has a strong interest in it, obviously we're gonna hold their attention for a lot longer than another audience who
Mhm.
may think it's cool, but they're not necessarily in the need of it or they may not even find it that interesting in the first place. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
knowing your audience is super, super important. Definitely the first step in the direction of a successful marketing campaign and a successful marketing strategy. Just kind of having an idea of knowing where your target is. So I'm super glad that you kind of outlined demographics and especially psychographics because one of the things, especially in the marketing world, as you already know, is emotion,
Mhm.
and how a product or a service makes someone feel.
Mhm.
And that alone can be enough to allow them to become a member or to subscribe or to purchase a product or a service. So this is great.
We'll talk more about that when I get to the end in experience, but people don't remember what you say, they remember how you made them feel.
Very, very true. Okay, awesome. Now, the L in this acronym stands for lean. And this I'll let you kind of cover this ground as far as this lean is concerned, but tell us about why it's important that we need to become an editor.
Yes. I get really excited about this and I get very covetous over type messaging,
Mm,
concise,
hmm
brevity. If you can say it in 5 words, you should, not 10.
hmm
So L stands for lean. You need an editor. Everybody needs an editor now more than ever. Whether we like it or not, we live in a TikTok world. Important data point I heard, I think it was last month, that people are 20% more likely to engage in content the shorter it is. Shorter is better, man. Shorter is better.
hmm
If you're writing a web page, for example, and you have 251 words, that's too long. It needs to become 2 pages.
hmm
My rule about blogs, we just talked about this morning. If it's 501 words, it's too long. It needs to become
hmm
an article. We need to
hmm
call the thing what it is and have the medium support that length.
hmm
If I go to YouTube and I see a video is 2 minutes and 1 second long, I'm not watching it. It's too long.
hmm
I know that people spend 140% longer on web pages with videos than without.
hmm
So it's a video space. Short videos are king. Short words are also king. Now, there is time and space for long form. My husband, for example, will listen to a 3 hour podcast. I am
Sure.
never going to listen to a 3 hour
Sure.
ever. But my
hmm
husband will cheerfully do that. So some of this is a matter of taste, right?
Sure.
Back to taste. But in order to maximize your message's market share, leaner is better. When in
hmm
doubt, leaner is better.
hmm
If you have to do something in long form, which there is time and space for, I can't, for example, pretty quickly explain quantum physics. you
Sure.
know, I,
Understandable.
I need more than 250 words to do that, if I can do that, which is another podcast.
Mhm.
If you must do something in long form, however you define that, it is wise to leave breadcrumbs for folks so
mm
that if I'm going to encounter your long form piece, I can engage in that piece either as, so I'm going to use a metaphor, a bite, a
hmm
snack, or a meal. So
mm
let's take the Las Vegas brochure, for example.
Yeah.
If if I am someone who is going to read that thing from beginning to end and digest every word, fantastic.
Yes.
They are going to engage with that content as if it were a meal. Now, as someone who creates this brochure, I am fully aware that not everybody is going to read that thing from beginning to end and engage
Yes.
with it as a meal. So, how am I leaving visual and editorial breadcrumbs about that piece
Mhm.
So that if somebody wants to engage that as a snack level, right? If
Mhm.
they want to engage that with that piece for a couple of minutes and not read every word, how are they getting the most salient points at a browse level? We
Mhm.
do that with, headlines, colors, right? Lots of different tools. But I am fully aware that long form pieces will sometimes be engaged with as a snack form. Same
Mhm.
goes for bite form. If someone is going to take that brochure and scan it, truly scan it, flip it,
Mhm.
right? Flip the flip book. Then how am I leaving breadcrumbs or visual and editorial markers for them so they can still take the salient points if they're going to engage with it for 30 seconds?
Mhm. Mhm.
So not only are we lean when possible, simple and concise,
Mhm.
but when we aren't and when we shouldn't be and need to do something in long form, are we mindful that the audience that we just spoke about is able to engage with that content and still see the most salient points brought to them very transparently and easily?
Mhm. As it pertains to just being lean, you talk about there's two things that I want to kind of emphasize in this part of the acronym alone: breadcrumbs, snacks, and meals.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to be able to leave. When you say breadcrumbs, my first thought goes to leaving a breadcrumb that would make somebody salivate at the mouth to want
Mm-hmm.
more. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one way of looking at a breadcrumb. Another way of looking at a breadcrumb is having the ability to condense to that level, to that like small of a size, to where somebody can get what they need and then keep it moving onto the next piece of media to consume. And so we do live in a microwave world
Mm-hmm.
where if we don't get what we want within 2 minutes, yeah, we're not going to watch it at all. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then some people, they want to salivate at the mouth for more. And so a snack bite or a snack will be exactly what they need to keep them coming back. And so I think both should be utilized as best as possible and as strategically as possible. But it should also, this goes back to audience. It's also important to know our audience as well to be able to understand, are they wanting more and more, or do they want everything in a snack or in a bite size or in a home meal? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. It's Amazon Prime Day. I
It
want
is.
overnight shipping on this,
It is.
and so does everybody else in the world.
Hmm.
It takes discipline. I can write 1,000 words about whatever,
Hmm.
anything, very quickly.
Hmm.
Writing 150 words takes much longer,
Yeah, it does. Yep.
which is in some ways counterintuitive. I don't need to tell the entire story because it doesn't always speak to the audience's listening. What are the most salient points that move the person that you're speaking with or move the people you are speaking with to the
Hmm.
next step along the decision journey? That's the rubric and that's the discipline we're trying to find.
Hmm. That's good. One more piece on this lean before I move on. I have a friend who he and I watch similar Netflix shows,
Mm-hmm.
but I will consume every minute of every episode. He skims the first 3 minutes, the first 2, 3 minutes of each episode to get the gist of what's going to
Wow.
happen. And if it doesn't get the gist in the first 2 to 3 minutes per episode, he says it's not a good show. And I'm over here like, well, you missed all this context. But that's what he's looking for, and this is what I'm looking for. So it's important to understand your audiences in that regard, as far as who's going to skim, who's going to really consume everything. So I'm really glad you brought this lean point.
I want to go back to something you just said because it was really important.
Yes.
Listen to how two people of approximately the same age, right?
Hmm.
Probably approximately the same demographics
Hmm.
would engage with the same content
Hmm.
in two very different ways. I think you and I have similar demographics on a lot of levels.
Hmm.
My rubric and the one in my house is that you watch three episodes of anything. You
Hmm.
must watch three. Then you decide whether to continue or to abort,
Yep. Yep.
which is an entirely different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So listen to how that's very different. Terrence is a meal guy.
Hmm.
I'm going to have an appetizer. I'm always going to have an appetizer,
Yep.
but I don't know if I'm down for the whole meal.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yes.
your buddy is bite all the way.
He's a bite size. Yep. Yep.
So
And that's go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, it just seems like it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, how people are going to engage with your content. How are you thinking about those meal, snack, bite, or appetizer, which I probably need to add to this, people very differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also kind of speaks to why it's important to put the meat and potatoes of things kind of in the front,
Hmm.
versus at the end or even in the middle. So we can explain the more important things up front for a conference example. Hey, this is who's going to be speaking. These are the topics we're going to be speaking on. These are the trending topics, the hot topics, and this is what the benefit is that you can receive as a pricer. And then the rest of everything else can us be explaining why this is important, the significance behind it, what it can do for your career and your just general knowledge as a pricer.
Let's push the metaphor once further and then we'll let it go because I don't want to overshoot the metaphor.
Okay, okay.
Think about you, your bike guy, and me.
Hmm.
You can have the most fantastic meat and potatoes
Hmm.
and maybe earth-shattering dessert.
Mm.
But two of the three of us are never going to make a dessert. Never.
Wow.
You know? So be careful about crushing the appetizer.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I like it.
That's good. That's good. Okay. Now, the unexpected. What is so important and significant about being aware and mindful of the unexpected as it pertains to the bridge between pricers and marketing?
I believe, and marketing best practice would believe, that any type of communication should teach me something. With all the information that's at my fingertips that I can find,
Sure.
anything that you're going to feed me needs to teach me something new about you or your company or your values.
Hmm.
I'll push that one step further, and even better yet, not only teach me something, but make me think. Marketing should meet the audience at a space in which they are inquisitive about something. We don't
Yes.
want to hammer home facts and features, but instead, a better lever is to pose questions,
Hmm.
to engage the inner discerner in the
That's
audience
good.
member, right? Engage the thinking, the thinker, the feeler.
Hmm.
And you do that through asking questions, benefit statements, other communication tools rather than just listing facts. Communication should, when it has an element of surprise, it gets you out of the clutter, the marketing clutter, and into hearts and minds.
Hmm.
So here's an example. For the rest of 2024, I set this own challenge for myself that anything I write to our audience needs to include something new that they don't yet know.
Mm.
Not only does that push our marketing forward, but it also pushes our company forward into innovation and thinking. So some examples of that, just between when I set that rule in June and now, is that we've included all breakout panels on Fridays for our Las Vegas conference, right? Switching from Sage on a Stage engagements to on Friday, they're all breakout panels to
Mm.
foster more discussions and collaboration and include more thinkers in the event. We added another day to Europe, to our European and global event that's happening in Berlin in November. So it's not a 3-day conference, it's a 4. Again, more thinking, more thinkers, and more collaboration by adding an entire day. That way, our marketing isn't same old, same old. Our events aren't same old, same old, same old, same old, because
Hmm.
we know now since the pandemic and more than ever that the innovators are the ones that are winning. That
Hmm.
is true when it comes to marketing, it's true when it comes to programming, it's true when it comes to product design and offering, and it's true when it comes to pricing.
Innovators win. Companies don't want to get left behind. As innovation continues, companies continue to evolve. And if you're not keeping up with the times, even if it's not just keeping up with the times, but even if you're not continuing to add a new element in the mix,
Mhm.
then people will lose interest. So, and that is a very true and real thing. And so I want to move on to authenticity. This might be my favorite point of your acronym.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, authenticity because it speaks to me.
Okay.
And I think that in today's society, in today's world, when it comes to marketing, or when it comes to even influencing, you can kind of sometimes spot out the fakers
Mm-hmm.
from those who are, legitimate and true and know what they're actually talking about. It kind of speaks to credibility as well. And so if let's go ahead and dive into authenticity or being authentic behind your marketing. If you want to kind of take the reins on this.
I love what you said about being able to sniff out something that's inauthentic.
Hmm.
I think that we all, depending on your personality and your tastes and preferences, but everybody can smell something that's inauthentic, and
Hmm.
you have a natural allergic reaction to that.
Yeah.
Um, Authenticity leads to credibility. Those are tied hand in hand. When I see something that seems authentic, I'm more likely to deem that credible. I'll talk about authenticity kind of on a baseline level, and then I'll talk about what I really mean by authenticity. So, as you said, it sort of goes without saying, but sometimes you can't go without saying. Is your message true? We don't put statements out there with promises we can't keep. So,
Mm.
I would define a marketing problem by expectations set by communication, right? Expectations set not matching the experience, the lived experience of your product or service.
Hmm.
So by putting a statement out there with a promise I can't keep, I am accidentally creating a marketing problem or not solving one that I already have. So expectations much that we set as marketers must match the experience, the lived experience of our audience through into our product.
Hmm.
So when you
Hmm.
talk about authenticity more traditionally, um, who are you and why should people do business with you?
Yeah.
People do businesses with people. People don't do businesses with businesses.
Hmm.
I know AI is changing the game with that, but I know when I am engaging with AI, I am not doing business with the person. When I
Yeah.
am engaging with a business that is outside of that construct, I anticipate engaging with people. Um, so I would encourage anyone who is writing or designing on behalf of an organization or giving feedback on writing or design to not be afraid to show some personality to
Hmm.
set you apart.
That's
Um,
good.
Setting yourself apart is the element of differentiation, which is something we understand as pricers and we understand as marketers. That's a commonality, right?
Hmm.
The way you can work towards differentiation is not only the words you choose, but also the tone and the voice through which you express those words and the look and feel of the materials. It needs to sound like you
Hmm.
as an institution. So when Lululemon is engaging with their audience through editorial, that needs to look and sound a lot different than Walmart because their audiences are
Yes.
different
Yes.
and they should portray their differentiation in the way that they speak and be authentically them. The
Yeah.
PPS voice, for example, is something that we've established as being friendly, accessible, but smart
Hmm.
and conversational. So, how do you hold those different values as an institutional voice? Intention, not only for one person who's writing that, but also globally, anyone who's writing on behalf of the organization.
Yes. Yeah, that's good.
But differentiation is truly in the nuances of word and
Yeah.
design choice.
Even with authenticity, reviews can speak to this. Yeah, if you want to, my wife
Mm,
and I recently went to a new restaurant, but one of the things she always does is she looks at the reviews first. If she's buying something from Amazon, which she
mm-hmm.
does a lot, she looks at reviews first, and obviously not every company can have a system where they just gather and accumulate reviews, but obviously reviews can shed the true light of a company. Authenticity, being able to kind of sniff out the frauds from those who are legit, and this giving the space to be relatable to a consumer. And I'm super glad that PPS kind of stands on one of the foundational pieces of being authentic with their members as well as their attendees at their conferences. So the T in evaluate stands for transform. Just like you did with being authentic and all the other letters in this acronym, kind of elaborate and go in a bit more depth about what transform means to this acronym evaluate and why it's super important.
Sure. So transform takes the end to end that we started with and pushes it a little further. So let me establish a couple of terms before I move forward.
Mhm,
These are the definitions that I've held on to about my career, and I
mhm.
think they'll be useful as some table setting here. Marketing is communication that's designed to sell.
Yes.
Okay. So it is that is different from communication
Mm,
and that is different from selling. It is communication that is designed to sell. So a second definition we'll use here is branding. How we define branding. And that's the space you occupy in somebody's mind.
mm,
So when I say Nike, you think of something, whether that's something visually, a human being, emotion that's evoked. You think of something, and that space is the brand. That's not the
mhm.
same as your logo. I've been teaching this to people
Yes.
for years, right? I'm sure you have too, Terrence. So, how do we use marketing and branding to move people along the decision journey with you? So, for example, when I say can of Coke, you might think of soft drink. So, I'm going to use two examples from Atlanta because we're here. Is that just a soft drink? No. What they want you to think it's bubbly satisfaction with a boost of joy and energy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
how is their messaging in line with this is a soft drink, right? A feature,
Mhm,
naming the thing, but instead, this is bubbly satisfaction with a boost of joy and energy. How is it tying emotions,
mm,
visuals, pictorial sensations, not only pictorial sensations, visual sensations, but when I say bubbly satisfaction, you can start getting taste and feeling
mhm,
involved. It's trying to leverage all of the senses
mhm,
and have you engage with the product at more than a feature level. So,
mhm.
a Home Depot example. Does Home Depot sell nails and wood? Yeah, yeah. They sell nails and wood. That's a feature, right? Home Depot, an Atlanta company.
Yes.
But in their marketing communication designed to sell, as I just defined, and in their branding, the space that you occupy in someone's mind, they're more after that they are a solution to bring to life your dreams while you put your own personal touches on your home, leaving your mark on the place where you sleep and raise your family,
That's
right?
crazy. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Exactly. So, how are we transforming and transformative with our communication with the intention to sell
Mhm,
and with the intention to truly occupy space in somebody's mind? Reach people's pain points, reach people into people's dreams and values, and more
mhm,
closely tie my communication to those things rather than the features of the item.
mhm. That's the magic sauce.
You've got it.
Even thinking about Coca-Cola, I used to think about those commercials, those Coke commercials where you'll see somebody drinking a Coke and the sun shines, or
Right?
a smile comes on their face, whatever the case is. Like they allude to an experience you have with that product. They really hammer down on painting this picture that your experience here is going to be worth it.
Mhm.
And having wording, like you said before, communication is one thing, but transforming your sometimes the literal wording, transforming your communication into this descriptive experience that's gonna leave you better, leave you stronger, leave you more equipped than you first walked in the door with, you know, that's the whole name of the game in this regard, it sounds like. Is that correct?
Yes, you've got it. We're changing hearts and minds in order to move people along the decision journey with us.
Hmm.
Which is exactly what communication designed to sell needs to do.
Which also kind of brings us to our last letter, which in this acronym, which is E, and it stands for experience, which kind of alludes to transform. Please, feel free to share a bit about experience and why this is such a pivotal point and a great ending to this word, evaluate.
Sure. Thanks for hanging in here, guys, with me on the 9 step rubric. We're on the last step, E for
Yes.
experience. um, I get excited about marketing. I could talk about this all day.
Yes.
So now more than ever, marketing is about creating experience. And we also talked earlier. about how we need to be lean in doing so.
Hmm.
So I would pose that the quickest and most compelling way to engage an audience into an experience is to tell a story.
Mm.
You hear a lot about storytelling and marketing. From where I sit, I think people lean a little too heavily into it as the strategic reason. However, it's very difficult to communicate values tied to benefits and outcomes without telling a story.
Hmm.
Just as you said earlier, we are trying to create more networking experiences, more community experiences, because I think that the pandemic, more than anything, taught us that being in isolation isn't awesome, especially for two extroverts like Terrence and myself. So how do we engage and put proof in the pudding with our products and services? Testimonials are an incredible lever, and also telling our own stories. Stories involve a narrative arc with a beginning, middle, climax, and resolution. And in doing so, how do we paint a picture of what your product and service will do for your defined audience? We drive what's in the audience's mind, right? When we talked about branding, by creating it, by creating a picture of what our product and service will do for folks, and then sharing that. So, when thinking about branding and thinking about experience, first you gain mind share,
Hmm.
then you gain market share. In leveraging testimonials, just like you said with your wife and the Amazon products, I'm much the same way. I'm not going to go to a restaurant until I've read the reviews, especially a
Hmm.
nice one, where the price is high, right?
Hmm.
Pricers. I'm not going to purchase, Bose headphones. Again, it's Amazon Prime Day until I know that those are highly reviewed, receive high reviews. Word of mouth is always your best marketing. That has not changed in my time. I don't see that changing anytime soon, and that's been the tale as old as time.
Yep.
Stories evoke emotion, and that's when you've got hearts and minds to change.
Hmm. Hmm.
Transactional marketing leads to transactional customers. I'm coming to you. I want your thing. Buy.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
That is not what creates long-term buyers or raving fans.
Yes.
Experience marketing creates experiences for folks that are loyal and buy more.
Transactional marketing creates transactional customers.
Mhm.
Man, that's a nice quote right there, Ange.
Right? And experiential marketing creates experiential customers.
Yes, yes. Awesome. Okay, so the nine-step process for pricers to deliver informed marketing feedback or suggestions for momentum to support their pricing initiative. Evaluate is the acronym. Angie Jackson, it was a pleasure to speak with you today. We're going to see you again this upcoming fall in Las Vegas. And that is going to be at our fall conference, obviously being held in October 22nd through the 25th at our fall pricing and workshop conference. Super excited to see everyone who's going to be in attendance there. And you'll also see myself as well as Angie there. Angie, one more question to leave you with. Where can listeners go to learn more about you, what you stand for, and more about PPS as well?
Sure. Happy to engage in conversations about marketing or about pricing or about anything, really. I love to talk about marketing, so send me a message and we can keep the conversation going. Angie at pricingsociety.com or on LinkedIn, Angie Jackson. I'm a CPE, Certificate of Pricing Education on LinkedIn, and looking forward to hearing more and hearing how this was helpful and continuing to push the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much once again. And listeners, until next time, we'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye bye.